Men are not allowed to speak. They're not allowed to have an opinion on reproduction. Just point blank. That's the opinion currently out there.
Hi, and welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Today is a very, very important subject. We're talking about abortion, and we're talking about. I had this on my list of things to get to, and I was going to do it one of my last episodes, but in light of the leak from the Supreme Court this last week, from the time we were recording this, that they are considering and likely to overturn Roe versus Wade. I thought I'd bump this episode a little bit forward. So we're going to go through like the political fallout, the need for social safety nets when and if abortion is banned. We're going to talk about women's rights, men's rights, all those good stuff, and how to address from the conservative side of the spectrum what is politically the right way to address it in a post Roe versus Wade society. Cards on the table. I am pro-life. I have always been, and I have a personal story that I might share as well. And so I think it's just important our audience knows kind of where we're coming from, and they understand to digest it through the lens that we are, for that we're talking. So I kind of want to give like a spectrum. I mean, obviously there's the exceptions for rape and incest. Some people on the pro-abortion, pro-life side of the spectrum are not for that. I tend to be very generous to the idea of making those exceptions. And so that's kind of, like I said, full disclosure, where my cards on the table. You guys can feel free to chime. I love to, Rachel, get your position on just sort of like the overall general. Are you pro-life? Are you pro-choice? And to what degree? And then Dad as well. But go ahead first, Rach, if you don't mind, so we can set the table here.
Okay, I am pro-choice. Sorry. Wow. I'm pro-life. I am very definitely pro-life. And I think that even though I think that, anything would be an improvement over where we are, I'm kind of like, okay, if we have to baby step it, we can baby step it. I would like to make abortion unthinkable at any point, in any stage, in any way, shape, or form. So, as far as where that comes to, if it comes up for a vote, then I'm going to vote, all the way. I can understand why people like the idea of exceptions. I think that, let's keep having conversations and keep discussing. And I'm super excited about the fact that we're, you know, the leak, which, as much as it may not be great that it did happen, I'm excited that it's giving opportunity for the conversation to come around again in a brand new way, and I think that it's a vital conversation to have. So, yeah, did that answer?
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I meant to
Okay.
say rape, incest, and life of the mother. So you're saying in all those cases, um, even in the life of the mother situation where it's mother or baby. I mean, these are those rare exceptions, but everybody likes to dwell on them. So just
I think that the only one that I would actually be okay with would be the life of the mother.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, Dad, if you'll I should probably call you Mark, for the sake of the podcast, but anyway. Um
Okay.
we're
Yeah,
just
I'm also pro-life, and with no exceptions. Uh, the life of the mother. That is one of those things. Is it the life of the baby or the life of the mother? Um, you know, I, it's we're talking, so rare. I would think that in that case, you could go to a judge and you could a doctor and say, the mother's going to die, or something, have a quick court, whatever, that justifies that kind of thing. But it bothers me that some doctor would use that as some kind of excuse or something. That's the whole thing. There's been so many cases where, yeah, mother and child were supposed to die, or the mother would die, and they went ahead and had the baby and both lived. You just wonder how many times that is even true. Is there such a thing? I don't know. It's one of those things. Do you trust people to tell you the truth on this issue? And there are so many scientific lies out there, and change of data and things like that. That I'm. It's unfortunate. If people were ethical and told the truth, you'd have less of a problem. But I would say, possibly in some rare exception, the life of the mother, it would be the only thing. Even rape, incest is not a reason to take the child's life. And the only exception, would be the life of the mother, but there's got to be some, hoop there. It's not somebody who just doesn't want the child. They always slip in the health of the mother, which could mean anything. Oh, geez, I'm going to go crazy if I have this child. Okay, so you can have an abortion. That's always been a loophole in the laws. And so it can't be the health of the mother. It has to be the life of the mother in that regard. And that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, sure. I understand that. Well, I mean, we started with the arguments on sort of why where we come down where we are. So we can continue that a little bit more here, and then we'll move to the political fallout. I agree totally, but I think that for me, this conversation is very important to have with there's an emotional argument to be made here, and there's just the facts. Right. And when you're talking the facts, sometimes you seem heartless, right? You seem like, okay, you don't care, if you make the law where it says, that, the health of the mother is not considered, you sound heartless, you sound, whatever. And so the emotions on one side tend to rise. And so I think having the respect for this conversation and to give it the attention that it actually deserves. I just think that, obviously we should try to be always respectful of these situations that could happen. So, while I agree with you, I think that it's a tough, it's a tough sell, I think, because how am I trying to say this?
I mean, you can bring up any number of different scenarios. The 12-year-old raped by her father.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be, and you say she's got to go through with the pregnancy, and you say, yeah, because if you do, you can do the DNA test, you can put the father in prison, give him a death sentence or something. I mean, we've got to have laws that punish incest. And if we don't, then, in other words, we could stop incest.
Yeah.
If you put people in jail, if you sentence people to life imprisonment, I think that would cut down on incest.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It may not completely, somebody's going to think they're going to get away with it, whatever kind of thing. Oh, she's too young to get pregnant, whatever. But by God, that would stop a few things. Same thing with rape. You do the DNA, you try to hunt this person down, even if it takes them 30 years and they go into service, when they're 20, years old, and the DNA shows up, and boom, no military, just off to jail because at 17 you rape some girl. I think we have to have laws that that punish rape, punish incest, um, that at a minimum make the, you know, even if it's consensual, the you got to have the child, and the father needs to be part of paying the child support and those kinds of things. And so there's got to be a structure that says, um, we're not putting children to death, we're not letting you get away with it. You know, there's consequences for both of you for having, you know, having this baby. You know, there's got to be some consequences, and uh, for some people that will kind of slow things down, or birth control or something. You know, make people understand that sex produces children. You know,
Yeah, that's where it's like hard in our culture, right? Like that's the hard sell to the culture, because I think that you can boil a lot of these like nuanced arguments down that we've gotten into here and gone through, two so far, to, what is the purpose of sex? Is it for pleasure or is it for procreation, right? Because our culture says it is pleasure, and children are planned or not planned, and their choice, and it is a focus on that existing, so there's like a disconnect, like the biology of it is not play a factor in how sex is viewed, right?
right?
And so that makes it where if you don't have a sort of a religious, aspect to it, where, sex is supposed to be in the context of a monogamous, partnership for the production of an extension of the family, right? And
Yeah, and
we go ahead.
I think again, it's part of a whole system of society looking at this differently.
Mhm.
You know, we don't have smoking anymore, or not much.
Right.
Very few cigarettes are sold now. It's not shown in movies. I mean, Andy Griffith used to have commercials for smoking. Family viewing. I mean, it was there. It was part of our society. And I think back to what Rachel said originally, that it we need to have a society that has movies and messages and everything there that says, um, this abortion's unthinkable.
Yeah.
I we had an exchange student from Korea, and she was appalled being here in this country, in high school, and having all the boys, um, yeah, teenage boys acting like teenage boys. Um, and her stance was, well, I'm Korean. We just we just don't do this kind of stuff. It's just not who we are.
Mhm.
And I think we've got to have that kind of message for men and women, young men and young women, that our future self is not one that's going to look back on at this as a regret. We want to have a relationship, a physical relationship with our spouse, that is, that's the only person you've ever slept with, and our society seems to think that's impossible. And that's a problem. They don't think it's possible. Where other societies, it is very possible. Sex still goes on, and things still go on, but it's not to the degree that it's normalized in our own society. And I think part of it will be, not having a easy um, escape by doing horrendous things.
Yeah.
That it's so radical a solution that it's like, it's like concentration camp. You know, we don't like these people. You know, they sure. You know, who wants to? You know, people that are mentally ill or have these illnesses or whatever. Let's just they're going through pain. Let's just put them out of their pain, put them out of their misery. They're causing
Mhm.
problems. If they procreate, they're having problems because they're a burden on society. Let's do the Hitler thing and just kill them all. Abortion needs to be seen like that. I want my grandchildren, great grandchildren to think that, wow, people actually put children to death. That's crazy.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I feel very strongly about it as well as I think most people do. They feel strongly one way or the other, right? And I had a conversation where with a guy, and he was going on about the economics of making a 14-year-old girl raise a child who she's barely even not even a child herself. What kind of society puts that on people? And it's like I didn't have a good argument for him at the time other than the it and he was like basically saying it's a fetus, so it's not a baby yet, and so legally whatever, and if you change the law and you make it where it's a human, you're just you have the economic impact. And to me that sounded exactly like the conversation they had in slavery, right? Because you know the brain size of African American was such that it wasn't a fully developed evolved human. Darwin and science tells us that these people aren't humans yet, so we're going to change the definition so that we can enslave them. It's for their own good. And if we did make them humans, like equal to the white man, then we have to it's going to impact our economy because they already have slaves, and then they're the ones doing this, whatever. And so there's like this economic reason why you can't do it, change the law. You got to keep up with the status quo. And to me it's like as a society, we saw there was the great awakenings that came along, and people got really, really animated about the situation, about it was time to recognize the truth. Humans are humans. We're all created equal. And we had the legislative framework in the founding, documents, to get rid of slavery. We didn't live up to that over the years, obviously, with Jim Crow and all these different, things, for decades and decades after, racism still existed. But from the legal standpoint, we have that. I think we have to apply that same logic to today, and we have to make, rather than fight a civil war about it, then we need to have, that was before the social safety net was really developed, before Social Security, before the progressive movement, where we have all of these, the welfare state as we know it, So, but now we have that infrastructure in place, and we should, in my view, we need to apply that, to take away the leg of that economic argument, and we don't have to fight a war about this. If we can take that away and provide better orphanage, I, as a conservative, as someone on the right, I see that what would I, there's not a lot of things I want to raise taxes, like I'm not really for that in general. But if there's one thing that I would be willing to okay with raising taxes for, is if there was an orphanage in my town, and that the system for adopting kids was a lot cheaper because it was partially funded by taxpayers. If we were taking care of the widows and the orphans in our society, the moral obligations that we have or should have, then I would be okay with paying a little bit more for that. Like I think that is a conservative argument for infrastructure spending. And you'll have to go back and look at the previous one of the previous we did, the guide to politics, because I think I lay this out on this fairly decently, on how liberals and conservatives are basically agree on these types of things. It's the extreme wings in both factions that kind of like get all the attention, but generally speaking, most people are in line in America on this. Most people in America don't want to kill babies. Like that's not a popular thing, even though if you look at the numbers of abortion, for and against, like it's fairly divided, and the ones that are very against it are tend to be the religious right side that's very against it. So I think that there's a lot of people in the middle that they're mushy, on both sides. I think they have their opinion, and I think that people that are, sympathetic to, I don't want to, babies to die, but I also don't want that 14-year-old girl to, have to raise her, a child of rape or incest or whatever.
There is
That seems.
not, sorry, there's
No, go
not a
ahead.
single person saying that the 14-year-old has to raise the child. We're just saying birth the child.
But without the infrastructure and without that element of the conversation, I think that if you're going to make the conversation and sway people, to me, you have to spend just as much time on why abortion is bad and why it should be unthinkable as how we're going to take care of these kids when we get our way, when we get this law passed. And if you don't have that, it's very similar in my mind to the idea of, get rid of Obamacare, but we're going to replace it with nothing. Like, what exactly did, you had the big Tea Party movement, the swell, and that it came to power, but it was just like a no, no, no. And it didn't have a lot of answers to the questions of the century and left a huge gap, which I think Trump came to fill. That's a metaphor for what I think will happen if we continue down this road and if we focus so much of the argument just on the aspect of making abortion unthinkable, which I think we should. I'm not trying to take that away, but I also want to give a good, solid idea of what conservatives, what the religious right would do and wants to do and thinks it should do, to win abortion. We have to think about the post Roe v. Wade world. What is that going to look like? And we need to pressure our politicians not just to overturn the law in our states, because it'll go back to the states, right? But also to put the infrastructure there so that we can take care of people. So you don't have these, you already know the media is against us because number one, they don't call us pro-life, they call us anti-abortion. Flip to any channel, the anti-abortion, people are out. The anti-abortion people are out all day long. I keep the news on, in my office, and it's anti-abortion this, anti-abortion that. It's mind-numbing, the propaganda that comes at you, and it's like it makes us sound so fringe and so crazy. The idea that we don't want children to be killed in the womb, and it's like, but where are the defenders of, we want to stand up for these children and protect their right to life and also give them a place in our society. That's the part of the conversation that we really, really, really need to focus on, in my opinion. And I don't see a ton of people doing that. So go ahead, like you had.
Yeah, well, we're in Roe v. Wade because of a poor ruling by the Justice Department. Had the Justice Department not jumped in with Roe v. Wade, allowed the states to do, to deal with it, and society to work through these things, we wouldn't be, where we're at. It's difficult once a law has passed. It's difficult to undo it.
Right.
And it's not, it's not undoable. We've even had, amendments, undone.
Right.
We had prohibition, and then we had, where we allowed it as a society. And so, to deal with it through the legislation, rather than finding, something in the Constitution to, to protect that, so-called privacy, issues that allows someone to take their own child's life. And that was a pretty far stretch. And so, the Supreme Court overstepped its boundaries and now needs to undo it. Now, where we end up after that is how well we handle, the situation. Um, are we going to put in, the other pieces of legislation that handles the problems, and are we as a society going to meet with the issues that we have caused through our movies and literature and stuff? In other words, we created a problem of pregnancy outside of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a problem we created. We even taught kids how to have sex and do it safely, and ended up with large numbers of pregnancies from that because we did it so poorly. Thank you, Planned Parenthood, for all your help in stopping unwanted pregnancies. Aha. So we've created this problem, and if we undo Roe v. Wade, we throw ourselves back into looking at how do we deal with the issue of quote unquote unwanted pregnancies. How are we going to deal with you know those exceptions, incest and rape and those kinds of things. The majority of the abortions are people, and I don't know what the statistics are, how many are in college that are, getting drunk and having parties, and, they ought to know better, kind of thing. And, men and women. And there's part of the thing too. I've maybe mentioned, my generation, and talking about my generation, guys somehow got the idea, through cultural influences, whatever, you go as far as you can. And it's up to the girl to say no. Now that's called date rape now. And I like the fact that there is something called date rape, that guys have to deal with now, and consequences of it. And I think we're in a better place than my generation was, leaving it up to the girl.
Yeah.
And if the girl was okay with it, you go as far as you can, because that was just, just the way it was. As insane as that sounds, that was the culture. As a male, I had no responsibility in that, and there may still be that mentality or some sort of version of that still out there. So we've not placed the burden of responsibility on males. We're still placing it on females. We need to place that responsibility on males as well as the females, but more so on males. And I think that women have it right, that men, they don't have to carry the baby and they don't care. Well, there's got to be some accountability on the part of males, and that needs to be part of our society. And all Roe v. Wade has done is it's taken that accountability further away, and guys just say, well, go get an abortion. If you don't get an abortion, it's your kid, whatever. We've got to make the movies. We've got to have the preaching and teaching that holds people accountable, for this, and a societal change. And I believe that it's as much if we as society make up our mind to do it, it's as much as going, making, ending smoking, eating healthier, getting rid of certain oils that we cook with or whatever,
Climate change, save the planet.
Yeah, save the planet. I mean, there's messaging, there's stuff there, but it has to be backed up with truth. It can't be backed up with pseudoscience, type things, or some kind of blame or something. It's, I don't know, but I've ranted. We need to let Rachel speak.
No, yeah. I was gonna say, Rachel, you go ahead here,
I
because
would love to. I think that just kind of bouncing off what Dad was saying, that one of the big problems that you're going to have, and is that women right now, young girls, and even women up to my age, have they're going to refuse to actually talk if a man is in the picture. Um, Men are not allowed to speak. They're not allowed to have an opinion on reproduction. Just point blank. That's the opinion currently out there.
yeah,
And so you guys might be okay with teaching, boys to have responsibility, and they'd be fine with that. But ultimately, the current viewpoint is that you're a guy, you don't get to decide. This is my body, my choice. And that messaging is so prevalent and so out there that they won't even have a discussion with a man about abortion. Like, if you bring it up the topic to somebody, nope, I'm out. I'm not going to have the discussion. You're making me uncomfortable because you're trying to make a decision about my body. And that's been, historically, women have had people telling them what to do, oppressed by men, right? So, yeah, they're not even willing to have the discussion anymore.
yeah.
So that's a big obstacle to actually, because if you can't have a conversation, how are you going to change minds? If automatically that wall goes up, that it's like you can't even have this discussion. You're not a part of this. And you shouldn't be a part of this because of the way that you've acted towards my gender for centuries. What do you do? How do you counteract that? So I think that that's something that, as this conversation is happening, that people need to be aware of. That you guys having this discussion right here is automatically going to make people just shut it off. And we don't want that. We want to be able to have a discussion. We want to be able to have a respectful discussion about a very, very sensitive topic, and a very vital and important topic. But you have to kind of overcome that obstacle first.
I don't know how to overcome that obstacle, and I'm acutely aware of that obstacle. I had a recent interaction with someone who basically, she basically said, men do not get to have opinions about women's bodies, whatever. And I, just sort of chimed in. My, ex-wife had thought about having an abortion with my son, and I didn't find out about it till a year later. But the pain that stabbed me in the heart, because I knew that she could end his life without my, you know, without me saying anything. And that was, now my ex-wife, and I raised that little boy, for years and years, 5 years by my, self. Well, not by myself, I remarried, but for years by myself, from a very young age. He wasn't potty trained yet, when I took full responsibility for him. And I, if anybody can talk about taking responsibility for your children, there are plenty of men out there that take responsibility for their kids. There's plenty of single dads out there. And yeah, that's amazing. And that should be, encouraged, obviously. There's a lot more single mothers. I'm not trying to give us all a pat on the back, but the fact that I don't get to have a place at the conversation hurts my heart. My little boy is, such a blessing to all of our lives. And the fact that, he could have been gone and I couldn't have said anything. His life could have been taken away from me because I have no say in the conversation, and I'm thankful, and I'm not trying to, just bash, slander, my ex-wife, but because she didn't choose that, obviously, and I'm grateful for that. But just the concept of it, it hurts. And I don't know that, and I tried to bring that up in the conversation and was basically just cussed out, essentially. But and like, oh, poor you, whatever. But I don't know how to get around that barrier. But I don't. My experience is that people that are really, really animated on the particular side will not have that conversation, but reasonable people, will. Reasonable women, I think, and men will hear this conversation and not shut it down. Might give them all kinds of feelings, but they're not going to shut down because,
I think that it might take women just stepping up and actually giving men their voice back. I think that's something that we've taken it away from men, and I think that women are responsible for giving it back. Um, and I really think that might be the only thing that actually happens is if we have moms who have our partners who are caring for our children with us, who actually are willing to stand up and say, no, you know what? He does as much as I do. We are co parents, and he has a right to speak to this issue, as a parent, because this is not something that you got into on your own.
Whether you're married or unmarried, I mean, if
Yeah.
you're not married and you can go get a paternity test and put him on child support, you're going to hold him responsible, but then you're not going to, financially, but you're not going to give him a voice at the table. So, yeah, absolutely. I was thinking recently about the whole Jada Smith incident, um, and how the way Will Smith acted in that situation. He was laughing about it; it was just a joke, and then 2 seconds later, he looks over and she's like upset. So he goes up there and gets himself kicked out of Oscars, banned from films, all this kind of stuff because he's trying to stand up for a woman who's cheated on him, that put him out, emotionally, to hang, and Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, that, Johnny, who's going to believe you? Who's going to believe that, whatever. And I didn't punch you. I just hit you. Okay. Shut up. Like, what kind of man are you? Whatever. It's like this is toxic femininity. We talk so much about toxic masculinity, and that exists, but we also have to talk about toxic femininity, and that also exists. I think that we have to view all men and women are created equal. We all have emotions. Whether you're a man or a woman, you have emotions. You have responsibilities to your children, to the society around you, and you have, whether it doesn't matter what skin color you are, it doesn't matter if you're old, if you're crippled, if you're a baby, if you're a fetus, a toddler, whatever, whatever age category you call yourself in, humanity is humanity. And we have to have a context and a society that is able to stand up for that. Male and female have valid contributions to society. We all do, and it needs to be respected and protected in America. And I think that this is something that we've been talking about in other episodes like this, the Great Awakening, and how it shifts political thoughts, right? So you have these the government systems, left and right, take different positions, and then things shift. The frontier shifts, whether it's to the colonies, whether it's to the West, whether it's to the Cold War era, and then now to globalization. All these different shifts that have happened. There's been ways of thinking about it, and there's always a left and a right, and there's always schools of thought, and there's always issues. And sometimes issues that used to be on the left back in one system back in colonial days is now on the right. And sometimes the things are on the left are also on the right. These things shift, but they all kind of have a guiding string that ties through them. But we're at a society where our external forces have shifted, and a lot of people like to discount the culture war. They want to look at the economic things that affect people's life. And I think the culture war is so central to what we're fighting about now. It's the from the first awakening, the second great awakening, the progressive movement, which is sort of an awakening of a type of awakening, and to now the culture war, which is I would say like a fourth awakening moment where people are very conscious of these things that are departures from truth, trans ideology, departure from reality of biological, truths.
Yeah.
And so we have this shift that's happening, and I think that this is a part of a normal part of a political realignment where our cultural values shift. And I think there's going to be a new left and a new right, and there's going to be people on the left that are going to come over to the right on this issue, that you're going to be surprised by that partnership. And I think it's because the right is going to adopt some like, oh, okay, we need to have this social safety net for, the legitimate role of government is to take care of widows and orphans. That is a legitimate part of government. So that is going to be incorporated into something that the left embraces. And now you have people on the left go, I identify more with that. I can't get down with the CRT and the, whatever stuff over there. It's a little fringe for me. The economic stuff, whatever. It's like all a little fringy. I'm going to go over here. And now I'm going to be on the right side. The left is going to be more, shift as well. And you're going to have this different alignment of politics, I think. And I think the only way to get ahead of this is to look at it in the context of a realignment, of a shift in people's thoughts, and try to win philosophically and politically, and understanding how to communicate to people. I was thinking about all these barstool conservatives, the sort of Trump, additions. Go ahead.
I think you're going out from the topic a little bit. The topic is abortion, and when Rachel mentions, woman says my it's my body. It's the wrong paradigm,
right?
And because we've allowed that and kind of stepped back and said, oh, it's your body, and you can't say anything about it. No, it isn't. It something's happening to your body. You have a life inside your body, and because you have a life inside your body, that's a human being. That life is to be protected, and it's a human being. It needs protected. There is no like my body. I can take a life. They don't see the separation between this human being in them and it being their body. Yes, their body is going to stretch and grow and adapt and stuff to it, but it is a separate entity, and it is a human being. And the paradigm of it's my body is a wrong paradigm. It's a wrong thought. It is you can't accept it. It's a lie. It is not your body. This human being within you is not your body. It is another human being. And
there's more to the discussion though, Dad.
What?
There's more to the discussion than that. You're talking about pregnancy is it is a huge undertaking. I've been pregnant 4 times. Those 9 months feel like the longest stretch of time that you ever go through in your life. That you feel every second, every day, it is impactful. From the moment that that pregnancy test was positive, it became life changing. Um, my entire paradigm for life shifted. Um, and I knew that my life was never going to be the same again. And that's contemplating the entire, you know, motherhood and everything. But even just those 9 months are a huge deal. You have hormones going crazy, you have aches and pains in your entire body. You know, it is, it's a big deal. If you talk about somebody that is, and I'm gonna back this up because I mean, remember, I am pro-life, but you have to realize that it is a bigger thing than just going, you know, it's not your body. Because that is true. But should a woman, if she did not choose to be pregnant, she's not choosing to be a mother, she's not going to have that reward, have to go through that 9 months of her body changing, growing, all of the aches and the pains and the mental stuff that happens, the hormonal stuff that happens, your body stretching and changing and growing, stretch marks that may never ever go away. I have stretch marks, and my youngest is 12 years old. You know, that's something that it. And then that's not even talking about birth, the pain that you go through in birth, the pressure, that anticipation, just it is mental and physical. It's an ordeal, especially if it's not something that you're excited about, that you're going to get the payoff of actually having that baby that you wanted. So you can't just lightly dismiss pregnancy and labor and delivery out of hand, because it's a big thing. There are there are people that, you know, have gone through pregnancy and the complications at birth, and they ended up having to have, you know, a complete hysterectomy done because of complications at delivery, and they were never able to have children again. You know, there are potential life-changing consequences to a pregnancy. So it's a big discussion, and it's more than just going, this is not your body. But at the same time, a mother, a parent, has a responsibility to their offspring. And in a society, we know this and we accept this. That we as a society know and accept. We know that, you know, if you bring a child into the world, that the basic necessities of feeding, clothing, sheltering that child, that's your responsibility as a parent. And I think that responsibility of having started a life by becoming pregnant it starts then. You have a responsibility to your child to bring them into this world. Is it inconvenient? Is it life-changing? Is it potentially painful? Yes, it is, but it's also within the realm of the human experience. This is not outside, this is not extra. You know, this is something that's literally our bodies do naturally. A woman's body is created, and her uterus is created for the purpose of growing and sustaining a human life and then birthing it. It's not outside the realm of what is natural. So, in that, I think that's where you go, is it a big deal? Yes. But is it okay to ask a woman to do that? Yes, it is. Because it's part of the natural process. It's what our bodies were created to do. And, it's kind of one of those, oh, John Mark, I sent you that video, right? Did
I
you
like it.
get a chance
Yeah.
to watch it?
Great.
Because it addressed it. Oh, what was her name? Because I want to give a shout out to her, because people that watch this need to watch that. Stephanie Gray.
Stephanie Gray.
I think
Okay.
Dad may have sent
Yeah.
that to me as well, actually.
Oh, that's fun. But well, the thing is, it really is. It gets to the heart of where the abortion debate goes, because all of the other arguments of is it a human, is it an actual life, is it a baby, is it is it alive, is it all of these things, all of those can be very easily kind of answered and addressed. We have a lot more scientific evidence than we used to have, and I think that that's something that all of those things you can get through very easily. But the best argument that the pro-choice movement has is that the whole, should a woman be forced to give up her body for another? And this is where the whole my body, my choice, sure, it's not your body, but does that other human have a right to my body? They're inside my body. And at that point is where this this argument really, really comes into play of going, yeah, it's not your body, but, and I'm going to try and sum up, but I really, really do say that if you look up Stephanie Gray and want to watch her thing, that's the,
It's phenomenal. It really is.
yeah, it's the violin hospital bed argument. And it talks about how, if you woke up one day and you were in the hospital and you turn over and you're hooked up to another person and you're like, what's going on? The doctor walks in and they say, hi, you have been kidnapped by a music lover group that found out that you were the only human being in the entire world that this famous violinist that they really want to keep alive, who is sick, if they hook him up to you for 9 months, it's not forever, but for 9 months, that this, you will save his life. He can't survive without you, but if you will be hooked up to him, for 9 months, just 9 months, then you will save his life. And it's kind of the whole, you didn't choose that. Somebody kidnapped you, hooked you up to that. Are you obligated to stay hooked up to that person for 9 months? And it really is the best argument that I've heard. And it is answerable. Stephanie does a fantastic job of answering it. I'm not going to do as good a job as she is, obviously, here. But she does talk about, first of all, for for anyone that was not raped, when you engage in sex, you are engaging, or you should know that there is a possibility, you are accepting the possibility that a pregnancy could occur. And it is basically the same as if you went out on the street with your child and threw a baseball, and they hit the baseball through the neighbor's window. And you go, well, I accepted that I could, play baseball, but I didn't, I wasn't prepared for the possibility that it would break your window. So because I wasn't prepared and I didn't, choose to have the ball go through your window, it was an accident, I'm not going to pay for it. We all know how well that would stand up in court. By going out in the street and playing ball, you accepted the possibility that you could damage someone else's property. So therefore, you are responsible for that. And that's for anyone who does choose to engage in sex, even if you were actively trying to prevent a pregnancy, there's always, we know, there's no birth control method that is 100% effective. So you are accepting that possibility that a natural consequence of sex, a pregnancy, could occur. And if you have accepted that possibility, then you now are responsible for that child. And it's a living human being with a unique genetic code that never has existed before in history, and it never will again. It's a life. So at that point, you're responsible for it. And there's a whole lot else to that description. She talks about how if you were kidnapped and taken to a cabin in the woods, and there was also a newborn baby in that cabin, and miraculously there's also formula and diapers there, everything that you need to care for that baby. Would we expect you, until you are rescued, to do the very bare minimum to keep that baby alive? Yeah, it's not an extraordinary ask to ask somebody to feed a baby with formula that's already there if you're the only one that can take care of that. But here's where it kind of differs. If you are being asked to stay hooked up to a complete stranger in the hospital, going back to that analogy, it's not a natural thing for the human race to have to be hooked up to somebody else. That goes beyond nature. If you were unhooked, then they would die of natural causes. It wouldn't be something that, you're not responsible in the natural course of their life to be hooked up to them. However, there is one part of the natural human life, human existence, that it is natural to be hooked up for 9 months, and that is in the womb. And it's not an extraordinary thing to be hooked up and to have that baby inside of you. It's not like you're being asked to do anything out of the ordinary. So I might have bungled that a little bit. I don't know.
No, it was pretty good. As far as I think chronologically, essentially what she laid out, the one thing that about that at the end of the video that I thought was pretty profound was she was saying that if you don't have an obligation to a stranger to keep them alive, per se, as much as you do your own offspring, that would just be a natural. Obviously, you should keep your own child alive if you have the means to, in a cabin in the woods, in this situation. That would just be a natural thing that a society or any, person would expect you to do. It's different with a stranger. per se, or you might think about the moral obligation that you have to someone that's a stranger versus your own offspring. So, but the whole thing where, you know, it's in your, you know, the woman has a uterus and the ability to carry the child. A man does not. I cannot, you know, bear that child. I will bear the responsibilities of raising a child, of financially supporting that child, cooking, cleaning for that child, doing all those sorts of things for that child. And I think we need to, you know, going back to that responsibility aspect of, you know, teaching young men about the responsibilities that they have to their children. And, you know, you can learn that by watching your parents, you know, raise you and your siblings or whatever, or, you know, men in the society around you that, you know, raise their kids. You can learn by example, but it also needs to be like, you know, Dad was saying, in the movies, in our culture, in our, you know, sort of like fabric of what the responsibilities are for men. And then, you know, I, you know, think about when the, it's just not so simple, you know. I think that that's what a lot of this is, you know, boiled down to. And I think it's good. And I think it needs to be having that conversation around. Does anybody have any parting words? I'm going to try to like wrap this all up, or any other parting thoughts here. Go back to Dad and then Rachel, and then I'll take us out here, because it's been a good conversation.
I look back at my clock, you know, I can't get it. Yeah, I appreciate Rachel, you know, bringing it up, because, you know, one of the things I did with my students, you know, a few years back was introduce them to Stephanie Gray. And it's been a while since I've heard her, and she is just phenomenal. She uses a number of other analogies as well. You know, people on airplanes and different things that she uses. She very logically, you know, approaches these things. She's thought about it and had discussions with people. Her Google talk on abortion. You know, you just think of, you know, a tech company having someone like her come speak. I mean, she is, you know, able to talk, you know, to people about these issues that normally, you know, might not be as open to them as others. And so, yeah, I realize, you know, I come down on the side of logic and reasoning and, you know, those kinds of things, but I also realize it's very emotional. You know, you know, my life was not a life of, you know, being a good kid, you know, a good boy. You know, I did things wrong. So, I mean, I realized that, you know, I could have had kids out there, you know, could have perhaps gotten in a situation where I would have married someone because she was pregnant, or they could have gotten an abortion and, you know, whatever. You know, so I'm guilty. I also feel like my parents and teachers in church, yeah, ultimately I'm responsible for me and all. And there was enough of a message, but there was also this wrong message that my mother, you know, kind of gave me. Is like, just don't get her pregnant. You know, that was the advice. It wasn't don't do it, you know, there's this and that. It's just don't get her pregnant. Well, you know, that's not a great message. That is not helpful enough. And I think that we need to do a better job of having conversations. And again, I didn't have these conversations very well. I mean, I handed my kids a book and, you know, here it is, you know, Dr. Dobson, there you go, figure it out. You know, so I didn't do a good job either, you know, kind of left it up to mom in that regard. But I didn't have a whole lot of help either. So I'm glad that we're having these discussions. We need to have them. And it's not just about abortion, but it's the whole, picture. And I think that, I sent you both emails today about the fact that we need to have discussions about, um, where and how we're going to deal with you know, the whole of the thing, not just, not having abortion, but how do we influence our children, grandchildren to have a different paradigm than what's currently out there, that where they have a desire and they see themselves being different than their society, and not seeing is that I'm missing out on something, and where they can rejoice, in those things, and all. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm going to end it.
That's great. Rachel, anything to add?
I think that going back to what you were talking about at one point earlier on, just the whole, okay, what do we do as a society? How do we prepare if Roe v. Wade does get overturned, and then, you have half of the states that are going to immediately, have laws going into place to make abortion illegal. Then what happens next? That's not the end. And I think that there are a lot of resources out there. That's something that the pro life movement has been increasingly doing, and starting, a lot of conversations with, okay, before we even talk about, abortion and whether, it's right or wrong, let's talk about, for those who maybe are pregnant, are considering abortion, what resources are there out there? What help is there? How can we support women who are pregnant, who would like to keep their baby, who are not seeing their way clear to do that? How do we, actually support? And I think that, there's a lot of really exciting things. And this is something that I would really like to see becoming more and more of the discussion is, okay, let's, sure, an orphanage might be a great thing. We already have a huge waiting list of couples who are waiting to adopt babies, and they just don't have enough babies to adopt. So that's something that, right away, I think the need, will be able to be met, making adoption easier, less costly for people, especially if they're adopting in the States. I think that that should be something that, we should look at those laws and evaluate those. I'm not sure what the laws are. Maybe you are. I don't know. I meant to look at that before we started this discussion, but did not get to that. But, looking at those, do we have those laws in place? What are those laws like? I actually, one of the things that I had mentioned to you about the difficulty of being pregnant in school, high school and colleges, there actually are a lot of laws already out there to support pregnant women in school. But there's also a lot of breaking of those laws, and, professors, advisors, counselors, teachers, admin that are they're not doing that right. But at the same time, there are advocacy places that, will support and help. So if somebody has been denied being able to retake a test, or, walking for graduation and all those things, you hear about a lot of those scenarios where people are just making it unnecessarily hard for a woman to be pregnant and in school, that, they're helping. So, because that is illegal. Um, but yeah. So that is, that's exciting. There's a lot of, places that provide diapers and formula and clothing and stuff for after the baby's born. There's a lot of stuff that's here. And that's something that, we, as the need increases, we need to look at actually increasing funding for those places, which, yeah, I think is phenomenal, and I'm excited that that will hopefully be an opportunity that we can have. And then just normalizing actually being a mother and continuing life. Um, you know, because, yeah, I agree with you, Dad. That the whole concept of, promiscuity and, having sex before people are ready to become parents, that does need to be addressed. Um, but we also, at the same time, need to have grace for those who are already there. They're pregnant, it's too late. You know, we don't need to be shaming people or shunning them, which I think that Christianity throughout history has had a tendency to do. Of, if you're pregnant and you're in a youth group, there's so much shame involved that you see those people that they're just leaving. They're not continuing to come to church. They're not being loved. They're not being supported. And that needs to change too. We need to let people know that, there is grace, there is forgiveness, and there is support in place. We're not going to just keep bashing you over the head because we think you made a wrong decision. You know?
I, I'm going to just say this too. I mean, I had two older sisters, both pregnant before marriage. Um, I think a lot of times people make assumptions that the church is, shunning them or whatever, doesn't like them. People make that assumption. It's kind of like um, self-fulfilling prophecy
Yeah.
thing. I think there are people out there that will say stuff and be hurtful and unthinking and all of those things. I believe that's a reality. I think that there are times when people make assumptions about you, um, and particularly church, feeling that they're being judged when they're not. And it's kind of like if if you're wearing something different than everybody else at a party, it's a form of partying, and you come in or whatever, people may not even care. Nobody's even thinking about you. Nobody cares about you, kind of thing. But you think everybody's thinking about you, when in fact nobody cares.
Well, I think it
So
might
I
be.
don't know that's necessarily true. And I just want to put that in there. It could be, and I think that we have to overtly, therefore, be welcoming and loving, um, and I think it's a good note to to sound on that.
I know from personal experience as having a child out of before we were married, and the most scariest thing, I had to go in a church. We went to church every Sunday, and yet here I am standing there and having to tell a group of, you know, uh, 10 people in our Sunday school class, okay, we're pregnant, and I had no idea what the expressions were going to be. of the judgment I was going to feel, if I was going to feel welcome, if I was going to be able to come back, if they were going to pull out knives and, stab the hypocrite, and telling even the family was tough, telling you guys, and probably I have to say it was obviously not the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was tough. It was very tough. And um, people say, congratulations, you know, congratulations, you're having a baby. And I, that to me was like, yeah, I'm going to, I don't know. It meant everything to me. We've been able to continue to go to church and to have a healthy family and family that just came around us, and helped us and supported us all along the way. And the proper response when somebody tells you whether they're married or not, and you're having a baby, is congratulations. And I got that in the church, and that meant everything to me. And so, when people say, again, the church is going to judge you, I think like Dad said, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm just going to stop going to church because those people are going to judge me. Those people will probably say congratulations, and the ones that won't, you know, when you told them on the street, they weren't going to tell you that anyway, they don't. Yeah. So, again, this episode has been very personal, but I think it's important to all of our lives, and that we talk about this and that we address it. And so my parting thoughts here, didn't know I was going to say that, but my parting thoughts here are, what I see people talking about, unfortunately, from my perspective, unfortunately, is talking about how it was leaked and how that's a document was a breach of norms and decency, and it's the deep state or whatever, and wanting to. I think that's an acknowledgement of like, oh, the polls aren't on our side, so let's turn it into this or that. Where I think you're missing such an opportunity to shape the conservative movement into a movement that takes care of people in our society and wrap our arms around them and say, you know what, we want to overturn this, but it's because we care about children, and it's because we care about our society, and it's because we want to do better, and I think that is conservatives, is about family values and about doing that. And I think forcing our government, demanding that our government represent us, in order for it to be a legitimate government, it has to represent us and it has to take care of its people. And this is part of the job. And so as the conservative movement, I want to see that happen. I think it's going to be a missed opportunity if we don't. And that's where I was kind of going with the whole, political philosophy, part that I was trying to get there. But yeah, so I think that that about wraps us up for this episode. There's so much more that we could talk about. I mean, she could go on endlessly about the, all the arguments, all the nuances, all the, situations, life of the mother, rape and incest. We got into a lot of those issues, the role of men, the role of women, the rights of men, the rights of women. We've gone into all these things. We talked about a little bit about the political implications. So I think we've gone, into a lot of different places in the discussion. And we might have to do a, a second episode on this, down the road if it indeed does get overturned. And I think there'll be more things to talk about at that point as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next time on the Johnny Random Show.